Okay, if everybody's ready, we'll make a start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this event entitled UNTOC and Wildlife, How can an additional protocol help us tackle illicit wildlife trafficking? My name is Mark Jones, and I'm head of policy at the UK-based wildlife charity Born Free. So that everyone's aware, we have participants both here in the room and online, and we're recording this event so we can share it for the benefit of those who can't join us this morning. And to our speakers, when you're speaking, please remember to turn your microphone on, the microphone nearest to you, and please remember to turn it off when you finish speaking, just so we can avoid any background noise. Born Free is a founding member of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime, which was created in June 2020 to encourage states to fill serious gaps in international law, including relating to wildlife trafficking. And it's been working with many states and partners to advance the discussion on the possible benefits of a new global agreement on preventing and combating wildlife crime in the form of an additional protocol to this convention. The initiative is very pleased to be co-hosting this event with the governments of Gabon and Peru. And I'm also pleased to welcome Angola's Minister for Environment to this meeting. We're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis. The United Nations General Assembly has recognized in no less than 5 previous resolutions that illicit trafficking of wildlife contributes to the extinction risk facing many species, negatively impacts ecosystems and their ability to sequester carbon, poses a threat to national and regional stability, undermines good governance and the rule of law, and increases the likelihood of zoonotic disease emergence. Yet there is currently no global agreement on tackling wildlife trafficking. At today's event, we'll hear from representatives from the governments of Peru, Gabon, and Angola, and we will also feature international experts on wildlife conservation, environmental law, and transnational organized crime, who will be exploring the merits of an additional protocol to this UN Convention against transnational organized crime. We only have 45 minutes to explore this vitally important topic. So without further ado, I'd like to begin by inviting Ms. Claudia Guevara, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Government of Peru to the UN here in Vienna, to provide some opening remarks. Ms. Guevara, the floor is yours.
Thanks for your kind introduction, Dr. Jones. Good morning or good afternoon to all the distinguished participants who have joined us today, either in person or online. So, who is organizing this event? John already explained you. So why have we organized this side event? Well, we did it because we truly believe there is a need to stop wildlife trafficking. And for that, we need to be aware of the extent of the problem and design the necessary tools to effectively deal with it. When the UNTOC was originally negotiated in the late 90s, the trafficking of wild fauna and flora has not yet gained widespread international attention. Member states came together to negotiate a strong instrument against transnational organized crime, together with 3 protocols on some of the crimes of most concern, namely trafficking of persons, migrant smuggling, and firearms trafficking. Circumstances have changed since then, and illicit trafficking in wildlife has become a major transnational organized crime worldwide, but it is not appropriately regulated. Various reports, including the recent publications from UNODC, the World Bank, and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, recognize that illicit trafficking in wildlife is a major threat to public health, to animal health and its survival, to natural resources and ecosystems, depriving local communities, indigenous peoples, and governments from their resources. In sum, wildlife trafficking has negative implications for climate change, biodiversity, economy, security, public health, undermining the achievement of the SDGs. For this reason, it deserves a prominent place in our agendas. As a first step, in May 2002, my country, Peru, together with Angola and Kenya, promoted the adoption of a resolution during the 31st session of the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, CCPCJ. After extensive negotiations, it was adopted by consensus. Among others, the resolution recognizes the negative impact of illicit trafficking in wildlife and invites member states to provide UNODC with their views on the potential of an additional protocol under the UNTOC to address the gaps in the current international legal framework. This was an important step, no doubt, but many more are needed. So without further ado, I invite you all to listen to the presentation of our renowned panelists, and thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guevara. We now have 4 speakers with considerable expertise in various aspects of wildlife crime and trafficking who are going to give a series of short presentations. We begin with John Scanlon, AO, former Secretary General of CITES and Chair of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Excellencies, and good morning to everyone who's joined us here in Vienna and online today. Now, we all know that there are many things that need to happen at all levels in tackling wildlife trafficking. But today we're focusing on the importance of international cooperation and exploring how the international legal framework that facilitates such cooperation could be strengthened. Now, over the past decades, we have made progress in tackling wildlife trafficking, which is encouraging. But this progress is both insufficient and fragile, and we're nowhere near ending these crimes, which are escalating against a backdrop of rapidly changing environmental, human health, and security challenges. We need an international legal framework that is fit for purpose in addressing today's global environmental realities, especially as it relates to the scourge of wildlife trafficking. The Wildlife Trade Agreement, known as CITES, is often referred to as providing some form of legal framework. It's an important instrument, but CITES wasn't designed to deal with wildlife trafficking. It's a 50-year-old trade-related, not a crime-related convention. It doesn't oblige states to criminalize breaches of the convention, and it only applies to the cross-border movement of a limited number of species. CITES doesn't provide the international legal framework we need to tackle wildlife trafficking, and nor can it. It does, however, provide a framework for regulating legal and sustainable trade, which is what it was designed to do. The UN World Wildlife Crime Report of 2020 says that 6,000 CITES-listed species are represented in illegal trade. But it then goes on to say that millions of species that are not listed by CITES may be illegally harvested and traded, especially timber and fish. And for this reason, when I'm talking of wildlife, I am including all wild fauna and flora across every region, and not just the limited number of species that are listed under CITES, which constitute only 0.5% of the world's 8 million species. Yet at the global level, we still tend to pay attention to a limited number of species, and often the most charismatic ones, and usually only once they're threatened with extinction. We should intervene early to stop a species getting to the point of being endangered. And this will help ensure the species can continue to be utilized legally and sustainably, including by local communities and Indigenous peoples. Now, there are many disparate, non-binding resolutions and initiatives in this area, and they're all good in their own right, but they have not mobilized a response of the scale and nature that is required to end wildlife trafficking. It's a scattered landscape, and we have no global center of gravity for advancing cooperative efforts or for reviewing the progress made. States could now embed both preventing and combating wildlife trafficking where it belongs, namely into the international criminal law framework with the UNODC, the UN conventions, the UN Crime Commission, and this duty station unequivocally leading a global, cooperative, coordinated effort. Now, the resolution of the UN Crime Commission includes reference to a protocol. And if a protocol found favour with states, what might it address? Well, firstly, states would agree upon a definition of wildlife trafficking. And as with the existing protocol on trafficking in persons, such a definition could facilitate a convergence in national approaches, thereby enhancing international cooperation. States would also agree on how they will cooperate to prevent and combat these serious crimes. And while the content of any agreement would be determined by states alone through a negotiating process, states could, by way of example, consider agreeing on the conduct that is to be criminalised, what species of wild fauna or flora to include within its scope, and this could include species protected under any international law, and most importantly, any national law, and on making it a criminal offence to import any wildlife or wildlife product into a country if it has been acquired in contravention of the national laws of the source country. And this would represent a remarkable expression of comity between nations or a mutual respect for one another's laws. Now, as you know, if a crime is included in a protocol, it automatically triggers the UNTOC's general tools for cross-border cooperation without the need to make offences punishable by 4 years imprisonment or more. And this is desirable when dealing with wildlife trafficking offences. They are better suited to a broader range of penalty options, including community service orders, restitution, paying damages and fines, as well as imprisonment, based upon the value of the contraband and the level of the harm caused. But perhaps there are other creative ways to achieve the same objectives. And we will find out this through this inclusive intergovernmental process that has been instigated by Angola, Kenya and Peru through the UN Crime Commission. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the visionary leadership of the presidents of 4 biodiverse rich countries, Angola, Costa Rica, Gabon and Malawi, who have made a powerful call and a compelling case for a new agreement. And to express our deep gratitude to the extraordinary Dr. Jane Goodall for her steadfast support. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much for those insights, John. Our second speaker is Susan Lilas, Executive Vice President of the International Conservation Caucus Foundation, which aims to advance conservation governance by building political will and providing on-the-ground solutions. ICCF is also a member of our initiative steering group. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you to the governments of Angola, Gabon, and Peru, as well as the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime, for organizing such an important event at the 11th Conference of the Parties to the UNTOC. I'm delighted to be here today to represent the ICCF group. We're a founding member of the steering committee of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime. To help combat illegal wildlife trafficking, ICCF works through its network of parliamentary conservation caucuses in source, transit, and destination countries across the world to support new and strengthened legislation. And we also work with judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officials to better enforce anti-trafficking laws. ICCF now supports parliamentary conservation caucuses in 24 countries. We are also a firm supporter of a new global agreement against illicit wildlife trafficking. And we commend the leadership of Angola, Costa Rica, Gabon, Malawi, Kenya, and Peru in this initiative. But why do we believe the international community needs to scale up its cooperative efforts? Reports from IPBES, UNEP, UNODC, and World Bank, among others, graphically describe the severe environmental consequences of wildlife trafficking for climate, ecosystems, wild animals and plants, as well as human and animal health. But the damage goes deeper than that. We know these crimes involve theft of vital natural resources from local communities and indigenous peoples. They discourage legitimate investors and undermine the governments of source countries. And they do this by depriving them of revenue, fueling corruption, destroying livelihoods, injuring and killing rangers, and creating national and regional instability. If we add the costs of these impacts on ecosystems, the World Bank estimates the cost of these crimes at a staggering $1 to $2 trillion each year. Successfully tackling this trafficking demands high levels of cooperation at national and international levels, and a potential new instrument would provide the necessary framework to enable this cooperation. So on behalf of the ICCF group, I'd like to thank and applaud Angola, Gabon, and Peru once again for hosting this important conversation, and we look forward to continuing to work to support you and your fellow member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Our third speaker today is Olivia Swart-Goldman, Executive Director of the Wildlife Justice Commission, one of our initiative's founding international champions, which works to protect vulnerable species from transnational organized crime through intelligence-led investigations and provides operation and analytical support, training and mentoring to law enforcement. Olivia's joining us by link today, so hopefully the technology will work. Over to you, Olivia.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime and to Born Free for holding this session and for including the Wildlife Justice Commission in it. It's important that we have the opportunity to talk about this issue in the UNTOC setting. Now, as everyone's aware, wildlife crime has a devastating impact. We've heard quite eloquently from two of our speakers already about the sort of large scale impact that it has. And it also converges with other forms of transnational organized crime. And we've had the opportunity to discuss that quite a bit in the UNTOC setting during this COP. And this convergence is also means that it's more and more possible for organized crime groups to infiltrate this area. And that's something that we've seen in our work, the increasing infiltration of traditional organized crime into wildlife crime. So what's very important to keep in mind is that this is crime and must be addressed in the relevant fora by crime experts. And that's why it's a great initiative that we're here today at the UNTOC COP talking about this. The WJC notices there has been an increase in enforcement in certain countries and an increase in awareness about the crime. So we've worked closely with Thailand, for example, the Thai authorities. They've done terrific work on the live pet trade. Mozambique and South Africa on the rhino horn trade, and Nigeria on pangolin scales and ivory. And these are great developments. But unfortunately, it's not enough. The relevant law enforcement tools aren't being systemically utilized. So first, intelligence analysis capacities are still lacking. And this is essential if we want to focus on those most impactful offenders. Governments have limited resources, and we really want to make sure that we're focusing on the right individuals. And you need intelligence analysis to do that. Second, financial investigations are still the exception rather than the norm. And this is really a specialized skill set. So we need individuals that are trained in financial analysis. And in doing so, they should focus on lifestyle analysis as well, because this will help in the asset recovery, proceeds of crime recovery, which is so important if you really want to impact the high-level offenders. Third, special investigation techniques are still underutilized. And fourth, as John mentioned, international cooperation is still lacking. Now, the UNTOC aims to ensure international cooperation against transnational organized crime, which wildlife crime is. It's a great resource to help us to tackle transnational or organized wildlife crime, and it can be used more effectively. It has provisions pertaining to the use of most of the necessary law enforcement methods I mentioned. Training on intelligence gathering capacities, Article 14, establishing effective measures against money laundering, Article 7, making use of special investigative techniques, Article 20. So they're there already. We just need to apply them in the case of wildlife crime. Now, a fourth protocol could help to address these issues in three ways. First, by shedding light on the problem. It's going to increase prioritization at a strategic and law enforcement level. This in turn can lead to an increase in resources and broader mandates, and it can create a momentum to tackle this crime before entire species are wiped out. The first protocol galvanized a global movement against human trafficking, and we can hope that a protocol on wildlife trafficking would have a similar effect. Second, an additional protocol could improve cooperation and harmonization. Creating a standard definition is useful for mutual legal assistance procedures and prosecution. And it would anchor wildlife crime as an issue to be dealt with within the UNTOC framework. Third, An additional protocol could help to close the impunity gap. A protocol criminalizing wildlife crime would make it risky for criminals to do business anywhere and could avoid crime displacement due to its Lacey Act type provisions. And we've seen how incredibly effective the Lacey Act has been in combating wildlife crime globally. Now, these three issues are essential and must be addressed. A protocol is one way to do it, but regardless, we need to be focusing on these issues if we want to have a big impact in curbing transnational organized wildlife crime. In conclusion, wildlife crime is a serious transnational organized crime, and we need to make better use of the tools at our disposal to tackle this crime before it's too late for so many species. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Our final international expert today is Daniel Kachoris, Executive Director of Sea Shepherd Legal, a non-profit public interest environmental law firm focused on marine issues. And Daniel is one of our initiative's technical experts. Daniel, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you to the governments of Angola, Gabon, and Peru, and the Initiative to End Wildlife Crime for organizing this side event. So as Mark said, I'm going to speak to you about how a protocol could help to fight IUU fishing. IUU fishing is increasingly recognized as a threat, and the National Security Strategy by the United States, published 2 weeks ago, for the first time mentions IUU fishing in several spaces. IUU fishing is also tremendously profitable. Estimates of the value of IUU fishing are hard to come by because of the nature of the activity, but the World Bank in 2017 estimated the total value of illegal fishing at 11 to 36 billion US dollars. And a 2020 estimate put the revenue of the illicit trade in fish products alone at 9 to 17 billion US dollars. Now, unfortunately, there's no great definition of what IUU fishing is. The FAO has an international plan of action on IUU fishing that provides a definition. And when you look at the elements in this, you recognize that all of them have in common that they take place outside of agreed management and legal frameworks. They all make it harder to achieve effective management. And it includes, for example, fishing methods banned for their outsized environmental impact or targeting protected species. It's important to say that not all IUU fishing is illegal. And if a specific activity is illegal, will usually depend on national law. Now, next slide, please. The actors behind illegal fishing are often professional and well organized, and they operate across multiple jurisdictions. So as Olivia said, it takes a network to fight a network. There are some international legal frameworks that can help, and John has covered some of them, but UNTOC is the principal global legal instrument to promote cooperation to prevent and combat the scourge of transnational organized crime. So we agree that that would be the right spot to do it if states would want to go that way. The proposed fourth protocol to UNTOC presents an opportunity for parties to extend the applicability of UNTOC to a broader range of IUU fishing activities and close some of the gaps in existing frameworks, as well as potentially support existing mandates that don't have teeth by themselves. As previous speakers, we fully recognize that the decision to decide to negotiate a protocol and adopt a protocol lies with the parties to UNTOC. If states were to go that way, I would like to point out a few drafting suggestions that would make it easier to combat IUU fishing through the protocol. Next slide, please. First off, fish are often a forgotten component of wildlife and in some countries not included in the definition of wildlife. So for maximum synergies, it would be important for the definition to include fish. Second, including CITES provision introduction from the sea in the definition of trade and trafficking, as is also in the UNODC legislative guidelines, would help make the protocol applicable to fishing activities in the high seas, which would tremendously increase the scope of its applicability. Next slide. Having established a broad scope, let's talk about how the protocol could support other mandates. One potential stumbling block for most of the use of mutually supportive mandates is a reference to national legislation. For example, CITES legal acquisition findings specifically say not in contravention of national laws. If a protocol were to make direct reference to international agreements, as John suggested earlier, that would help also with the fact that some of the MEAs have a very poor track record of being transcribed international law. Also, the subparagraph B here, as suggested in the 2020 proposal of the End Wildlife Crime Initiative for a new protocol, would give port and transit states an additional legal basis to take action against vessels in IUU fishing, and would shift part of the enforcement burden away from source countries and to transit and destination countries. Last slide. I also wanted to highlight a few other drafting suggestions going forward. It's important to know that UNCLOS places some restrictions on the use of corporal punishment by coastal states for IUU fishing violations. Those are very specific. I think they could be addressed in drafting the protocol and implementing it. It's also really important, as John mentioned, that the protocol would forgo UNTOC's requirement that the crime must be punishable by a maximum of at least 4 years in prison. And given fishing violations are often dealt in with administrative fines, this would be very important to increase the scope and applicability. It's also important to bring the fishing sector on board, which is often not present in discussions about wildlife crime. And we think that moving from a multinational approach to multi-stakeholder approach, given that civil society has diversified its roles in combating wildlife crime, would also be appropriate if states agree and think that's a good way to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. We now have a short video message from Dame Jane Goodall, DBE, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace. And the Jane Goodall Institute is an international champion of the global initiative to end wildlife crime.
Hello, everybody. This is Jane Goodall, and I'm delighted to join you today at the 11th Conference of Parties to the UNTOC, because I want to talk about a cause that's very close to my heart, and that's stopping the illicit trafficking of wildlife. I'd like to thank at the start our good friends at the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime for inviting me to join this important conversation. The Jane Goodall Institute, JGI, has been an international champion of the effort to stop the illegal wildlife trade ever since its early days, and we're proud to continue working towards much-needed wildlife law reforms. As the recent COVID-19 pandemic has made abundantly clear, the way we treat wildlife does matter, not only to animals, but to us humans as well. Whilst causing local or even global extinctions, illicit wildlife trafficking is also threatening our health, bypassing the essential biosecurity controls that are needed to ensure the health of people, farm animals, and other wildlife. It undermines our efforts to mitigate climate change and loss of biodiversity, as well as the ability of countries to sustainably manage their natural resources. Finally, it causes immense suffering to millions of animals that are taken from the wild and killed for their body parts or sold in wildlife markets for food, medicine, or exotic pets. And all this leads to conditions that make it relatively easy for pathogens, such as the COVID virus, to spill over from an animal to a human. And this, of course, may give rise to a new zoonotic disease. Unless we end this cruel trade, many of our primates and other wildlife species will soon be gone, and gone forever. This is why the JGI continues to work tirelessly against wildlife crime, including through its Forever Wild campaign and its sanctuaries and rescue centers all over the world. As an international champion of end wildlife crime, our JGI Institute also supports a bold new global agreement on tackling wildlife crime, to be achieved through an additional protocol under the UNTOC. No country can effectively stop wildlife trafficking on its own, for this trade knows no boundaries. It's only through our collective will and continued collaboration across borders that we can stop the trafficking of wild animals. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the co-hosts of today's event, Gabon and Peru, two beautiful and biodiverse rich countries, to thank them for leading the way, for the first time, towards the adoption of an international agreement on wildlife crime. Alongside 4 other beautiful and biodiverse rich countries, Angola, Costa Rica, Malawi, and Kenya, you've started a conversation our wildlife desperately needs. In May 2022, at the 31st session of the UN Crime Commission, your efforts led to the adoption of the first UN resolution ever to mention a global agreement on illicit wildlife trafficking, and I'm so grateful that this wonderful result was achieved. In the coming months, member states will be asked to express their views on how to improve our international legal framework, including the possibility of an additional protocol under the UNTOC on tackling illicit wildlife trafficking. I urge all world leaders to carefully consider this urgent matter. Every year that we postpone taking serious global action against wildlife crime is another year closer to the extinction of countless species and the emergence of new and potentially devastating diseases. Honestly, there's no time to lose. It's so important that we remember we are part of the natural world and we depend on it for food, water, well, everything. And we only have to think of the hurricanes, floods, droughts, wildfires, and heat waves that are harming all parts of the planet, that we realize the deadly harm we've already caused. If we continue to harm our environment and animals, if we continue to generate new zoonotic diseases, well, we're probably doomed. So thank you so much for attending and for your interest.
Thank you so much to Jane Goodall for that poignant message. I would now like to invite Rika Patonen, Programme Manager at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, to say a few words about the process and the next steps following the resolution adopted at the CCPCJ meeting last May. Over to you, Rika.
Thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this very inspiring event. I'm actually really touched by the words and your dedication. So thank you for all the work that you do, really, truly. So my role here is to talk about the possible process on the implementation of the resolution 31.1 adopted by the Crime Commission, the CCPCJ, in May. And I see a lot of familiar faces here from those negotiations. Unfortunately, I have bad news to start with, and that is that we don't have funding for the implementation of that resolution yet. But then the hopeful news that there are some donors who are possibly interested in funding that the implementation of the resolution. So I believe we all have our fingers crossed that we are able to start the implementation. And I'm actually hopeful that that will happen soon. Let's hope my optimism is grounded. So basically the resolution talks about, as you already mentioned, gaps that may exist in the current international legal framework to prevent and combat illicit trafficking in wildlife. It also talks about countries' experiences and good practices and challenges in terms of preventing. So these are the things that we would then look into. The process that we would follow is that following the wording of the resolution, which also refers to an earlier resolution by this body, the Conference of the Parties in its previous session, the resolution 10/6, we would put together a questionnaire and through a note verbal send that questionnaire out to all state parties and signatories and observers. So that would go out to everybody. provided we get the funding, again, my fingers are crossed, we would also, do it in all the official languages, which means that it's quite a, heavy process in 6 languages. Would also receive responses in the 6 languages. We would process that, hopefully do an analysis, put it together in a report, and then submit it as soon as possible. All of that takes a while because of the multiple languages involved, and meaning also we need multiple people involved in this whole process. But again, we are really hopeful that we are able to start and kind of support you in the work that you do, including the states parties here present in the room. Also, the final word that I'd like to mention is that resolution L6 also contains some recommendations from the joint debate on crimes that affect the environment. And that resolution now went through the committee of the whole and will go to the plenary session, where if all predictions are true, it will very likely be adopted then. So there's another resolution that will emanate from this conference of the parties, also touching upon wildlife trafficking. And so we all continue the work and do the little part that we can. And thank you again for this inspiration today.
Thank you very much, Rika. Now I have the honor to invite His Excellency Abias Wango, Angola's Secretary of State for Environment, to provide us with some closing remarks. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for giving us the floor. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today in person and online. I'm pleased to take part of this important side event on behalf of Government of Angola. And I would like to thank all experts and speakers for their excellent contributions to this workshop. Honorable delegates, distinguished colleagues, Angola has some of richest and most diverse wildlife in Africa, with iconic species, unique biological diversity and landscapes. If left unaddressed, the illicit wildlife traffic threatens to strip the country of these precious sovereign resources and the opportunity for our people to prosper from our natural resources. For this reason, in September 2021, Angola's President, Honorable Excellence João Lourenço, publicly called for the adoption of new global agreements on illicit wildlife trafficking in the form of additional protocol under the UNTOC. Angola's statement came after a powerful joint statement of President of Costa Rica and Gabon, and was followed by similar call by President of Malawi. In May 2022, Angola took this commitment a step further and submitted a crucial draft resolution to the CPCJ alongside with Kenya and Peru. The resolution, adopted by a consensus at the 31st session of the Commission, invites member states to submit their views on possible responses to address gaps in current international legal framework to prevent and combat illicit wildlife trafficking, including the potential of additional protocol to the UNTOC. This important resolution was ultimately co-sponsored by 12 other states, namely Colombia, Ecuador, Egypt, Gabon, Ghana, Honduras, Malawi, Morocco, Mozambique, Paraguay, Philippines, and the United States of America. I mentioned each of every of these member states because I believe this sponsorship list empower our message and encourage us to take actions. Almost all these countries are rich in biodiversity. Like Angola, these countries value natural resources and want to protect them from criminal exploitation so that they can benefit local communities and continue to exist for generations to come. Distinguished colleagues, illicit wildlife trafficking is not only driving countless species towards extinction. It is affecting all of us. It is affecting our security, human and animal health, degraded our ecosystems, and exacerbating climate change. Source countries from every corner of the world have supported this resolution for a single reason. We are trying our best to contain the damage done by wildlife crime, but we cannot successfully stop this transnational organized trafficking on our own. We need all countries with us, from right across the illegal supply chain, by the source, transit, or destination countries. On behalf of Angola, I humbly ask your help in advancing the discussion on additional UNTOC protocol on illicit wildlife trafficking and actively engage in implementation process of our CCPCJ resolution. In the coming months, member states will be asked to share their views on this matter with UNTOC, UNODC, and we hope to count with support of all of you. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. We look forward to continue working with you on this issue. I thank you once more.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. It's a real honor to have you at our event here today. Finally, I'm hoping to be able to give the floor to His Excellency Lee White, CBE, who's Minister of Water, Forests, the Sea and Environment for the government of Gabon, who is planning to provide us with his thoughts by video link to add to those of our international experts and our distinguished colleagues from member states here today.
Apologies, I've had a few issues getting with my internet connections. My name is Guylaine Omenda. I'll be reading Minister Lee White's statement. He's unable to join in. Thank you, Dr. Jones, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues. It is a pleasure for me to join you online today. Although I am saddened I could not be there in person. Gabon is proud to co-host such an important side event at the 11th Conference of Parties to the UNTOC, alongside with the government of Peru and with the support of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime. I was also delighted to learn that the Secretary of State for the Environment of Angola was able to join the event in person today and will give the closing remarks after me. In May 2021, the president of Gabon and Costa Rica publicly called for an additional protocol under the UNTOC, recognizing the serious gaps that exist in our current international legal framework. We are delighted that the president of Angola, His Excellency Juan Lorenzo, and the president of Malawi, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus McCarthy Chakwera, have both since supported this call through their own powerful statements. I'm also proud to say that Gabon was one of the first states to express its support for the resolution Angola, Kenya, and Peru submitted at the UN Crime Commission early this year, asking member states to submit their views on an additional protocol to the UNTOC on illicit wildlife trafficking. As our panel of experts thoroughly explained, the costs of wildlife crimes are enormous, not only for our biodiversity, but for our people too. I will not analyze the consequences of wildlife trafficking any further. But I do want to briefly remind our audience of how protecting our wild fauna and flora, both marine and terrestrial, can ultimately benefit all of us. As some of you may know, Gabon is considered to be the last stronghold for the critically endangered African forest elephant, being home to 60 to 70% of the species' global population. What many do not know, however, is that forest elephants play a vitally important role in maximizing the carbon sequestration of their habitats. So much so that as a live forest elephant's value, based on carbon sequestration services alone, is valued by IMF staff at 1.75 million per elephant. The benefits of protecting these magnificent animals are massive. Dear colleagues, I would like to conclude today's side event with the words of our president, His Excellency Ali Bongo Ondimba, who, in his statement of May 2021, said, "It is time to treat wildlife crimes as the serious and highly destructive crimes that they are. We owe it to the world's youth to act boldly and swiftly to ensure we pass on a healthy and prosperous planet." Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Ghislaine, and I'm really pleased you were able to join today and provide the closing statements on behalf of Minister White. And I'd just like to give the floor again to Angola's Secretary of State for Environment, Abea Swango, who would like to make some remarks.
Just because it was said that I'll be doing the closing remarks, and then here they are. Dear colleagues, wildlife traffic is a serious issue. And the only way that we have to address this is staying together, working together on different ways. And we really hope that with this discussion, we move from words, papers, to action, because this is what we require back home. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. So that concludes our event today. I hope you found it stimulating and thought-provoking. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, our distinguished guests, for giving their insights, and to everyone who has joined us today, both here in the room in Vienna and online. And to find out more, do visit the website of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime. That's endwildlifecrime.org. And we'll make the video of today's webinar available online in the coming days. So thank you very much, and very best wishes for a successful conclusion to the 11th Conference of the Parties to the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Thank you.
Thank you.